What's happening, guys? My name's Austin, and thanks for tuning in for another episode of Tech Talks with Tom. And as the name would imply, sitting down with Mr. Tom Anderson today. Tom, how you doing, buddy? Thanks so much for joining me again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always fun chatting with you, Austin.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right, so we've got some great stuff to talk about today. So this is going to be a DevvExchange tech-focused talk. And, you know, leading up to this, I know a lot of people have heard me or you or others talk about, in a real general way, the technology underpinning DevvExchange that's forthcoming. And in no uncertain terms, we say this is not technology that has really ever been deployed on the market, period. And I think it's, you know, it's important to say that, but it's more important to kind of get into maybe the minutia or at least a high level nitty gritty of how exactly that works. And so one of the phrases that we've been using, which I think is very poignant and it helps me out a lot, is, you know, CTS plus MIS equals RCR, right? Which is contingent transaction sets plus mathematically instant settlement equals the removal of counterparty risk. And what I was hoping we could do, and we'll see where that leads us, is we'll kind of take that one chunk at a time, and we'll see what rabbit holes we dive down, if that's good with you, Tom. So if we want to start with these contingent transaction sets. Now, I mean, I can glean some information based upon the name itself, but could you dive into a little bit about what these are and why are these so unique?
So let me take one step back and kind of put the contingent transaction sets in context. And in past discussions, I think maybe mentioned it before, we were originally calling it atomic transaction sets. And the problem with that name is people use the phrases atomic swaps and things like that, and there's been hacks, and it's completely unrelated. It's not the same thing at all, but the name kind of led people down the wrong rabbit hole when they were trying to look it up. So, and contingent transaction set's a better name for it anyhow, because it's, you know, more indicative of what it really is and the real invention that's the heart of the exchange. So again, if you take a step back, we spent 8 years building the DevvX blockchain, over 8 years at this point, and, you know, created our sharding solution. Really nothing else out there like sharding. The sharding solution itself led to very high throughput, high speed, cost effectiveness. And then we had other solutions, you know, like our fraud, theft, loss protections and our privacy solution, for example. So we've been building the blockchain for, you know, 8 years, as everybody knows. But then, you know, the past 2 years, we've been building the exchange technology, and the exchange technology really exists because of one invention, and that's the contingent transaction sets. That's what makes it happen. That's the secret sauce behind it and the magic that makes it happen. And, you know, kind of fundamentally what it is transactions that are grouped and they go through on a block as a group if and only if all the requirements are met on them. So let's go back to kind of an age-old problem. You have two people that want to, you know, exchange something. Just even like in the old days, like, you know, I'm going to give you some shingles for your roof in exchange for a cow, right? You know, how do I know you're going to bring the shingles? How do you know I'm going to bring a cow? Whatever. In general, people wanting to exchange things, you know, barter for forever, right? And so, as you know, that concept kind of evolved. You know, there's over time middlemen, and you can put stuff in escrow and everything. So you always have this problem of how does one person get one item and be assured that the other person's gonna, you know, fulfill their side of the deal, right? If you buy something on Amazon, you know, do they ship it and then you pay, or do you pay and then it's shipped, right? So it's an age old problem, right? And so what contingent transaction sets do is they put the contingency on the approval, and then you combine that kind of basic concept with cryptography, you know, and you do an ECDSA signature on that contingent transaction. And what you've ended up doing is you've eliminated that problem of who gets what first when two people are exchanging things. So you know, if I want to pay you for a car, and the record of the car is the car title. So let's say we had that on the blockchain, for example. Do you deliver the title, or do you deliver the payment first? Well, what you do is you say, I'm going to give you the payment if and only if I get the car title. And the other side says, I'm going to give you the car title if and only if I get the payment. and then what happens is those two transactions get grouped together, and then this transaction is good with this one, this transaction is good with this one. If either one wasn't there, it wouldn't be, but they both are. They're in a contingent transaction set now, so it's a set of transactions, and they go through on the same block. And so there's very few things in life that are mathematically instantaneous, right? Like almost nothing. Things can happen very, very fast in nanoseconds or whatever, but very few things that are mathematically instantaneous. This is, right, because of the definition of what a blockchain is. Soon as that block hits the blockchain, mathematically, instantaneously, the assets have traded hands, because the transfer, from the buyer to the seller, and the transfer from the seller to the buyer happen on that block. And so I mean, that's huge. That is the future of how all assets will be exchanged in the future. I have no doubt of that, and we're the only ones that can do it right now. But when you look at global exchange, that is the future of how global exchange is going to happen. And, I mean, that's a pretty big statement, right? An age old concept. And how can you say that like it's gonna get changed based on this really pretty simple invention in the scheme of things? It's elegant in its simplicity, I guess I would say. It's not simple in its implementation, but because you have to have a layer one blockchain to be able to implement it, because you gotta validate at the consensus level, and make sure that transactions are grouped and everything. But the general concept that this goes through if and only if it's grouped with other things, and the other side goes through if and only if, and those get put in a group, that's a pretty elegant in its simplicity type of concept. So how could you say that is the future of all exchanges? Well, I mean, the world is moving towards tokenization and tokenizing real world assets. So that's one thing, is assets are going to be maintained on a blockchain. And then if you think about it, the entire industries around middlemen and brokers and everything that happens that in the past has needed to happen because you don't have mathematically instantaneous settlement. Now you have that. Those entire industries, are going to go away. So it's just a much better way to do it. You own your assets, and you want to buy something or you want to trade for something, you're assured it's going to happen. Like, it should be intuitively obvious that that's the future of how things are going to happen now that there's a capability to do that.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack there. And so if you see me looking down, it's because I'm taking notes. I'm not like ignoring it, but so, yeah. If I think to, all right, when you were talking about the cow and the shingles, right? Obviously that's the reason escrow agents were invented.
Not the best example, but yeah.
Hey, I don't know. If you got a roof to build, you need those shingles, right? And so the escrow agents, right? So obviously that was the reason they were invented, to kind of solve that problem. And when I think to, the current iterations of what we would refer to as centralized exchanges that aren't really exchanges, they're more or less brokerages, but a lot of concessions have been made for the sake of an appealing trading environment. And a lot of people are quite unaware of really the risk that they're even taking by using those types of trading environments, right? And so you had mentioned something, and I'm very curious about this, that this happens at the consensus level of the network. And we were doing a Twitter Spaces not too long ago, and this was the first time I had received that information, which kind of was a real interesting moment for me, because I had made the assumption that these were just happening in smart contracts. And that's because I was looking at it through the lens of traditional cryptocurrency. But that's not the case. And I think that's now, would you say that removes a potential attack vector or a security flaw that is quite apparent in most of crypto?
Yeah, it totally does. Right. So one way to think about our exchange is it's the best of both worlds for centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges, right? So we've got the high speed, high throughput, ease of use, low cost. And so that centralized exchanges have, but now you have where you maintain and hold your own assets. But the fact that it's, you were just describing that it goes through at the consensus level is, a really important point, because when you compare it to decentralized exchanges, you open up attack vectors like front running, for example. You open up attack vectors like hacks to the smart contracts. It's very difficult. This is why I'm not a fan of Turing complete, smart contract systems, because you can't guarantee security at scale. and you're constantly, I mean, this is true to some extent always with any kind of, system where you maintain ownership of things. There's always going to be hackers trying to, hack. But if fundamentally innately in your design, you've got a architecture that's that much more difficult to protect. Kind of like, maybe Windows versus iOS, right? iOS designed it knowing a lot of what's happened, in the past, and designed an operating system around security that makes it much more easy to keep things secure and remove viruses and everything. So that's that. In that analogy, it's kind of similar. I think with smart contracts, you just have an architecture that's just very difficult to maintain security. I would argue impossible. So I don't like turn complete smart contract solutions. So instead of having it built on top of the overall network, which also arguably more importantly adds cost and time delays, right? If you do it at the consensus level, especially with a blockchain like ours, now all of a sudden you've got you own your assets the entire time, but it happens fast and happens quickly, and so we have a technology that does something nobody else can do right now. There's no middleman. You own your assets through the entire exchange, and it happens fast, cheap, and easy to use user interface. That doesn't exist elsewhere. So I think those are going to be huge competitive advantages on our exchange compared to everything else. And one other point on that I'll make as well. You also have the ability to have regulatory compliance. So FTX showed how the risk that you described. That people can steal, and Binance or Coinbase could steal our assets, right now. They're probably not going to, but FTX probably was not going to as well, and so regulators hate exchanges because they're, as you said, brokerages rather than exchanges. So now with our approach, you can, for the first time, have a regulatory compliant exchange where it really operates as a in the same kind of regulatory environment that a TradFi exchange operates. So we spoke, for example, to Swiss regulators, and they said if you can manage an exchange where you don't take control of people's assets, we can get you regulated and approved, and we would become the first approved Swiss crypto exchange. And that's huge. That's the kind of thing I think we could become the gold standard. So this approach gives huge benefits to users, but in a practical sense, especially with a lot of the TradFi world now moving into blockchain with this big tokenization movement, if we become the gold standard for how this is done, regulators for the first time like how a crypto exchange is moving, all of those new customers can come to us that they can't go to others. An example is if you have a middle-sized bank, for example, and that middle-sized bank wants to allow their customers to trade, or they want to trade, they can't take their deposits and move them into Coinbase and take that risk. They have a fiduciary responsibility of how they run their business. They can't put the same level of risk that retail does with Coinbase. They can't do it. And so, but in our case, they could have their own cold storage that maintains assets, and their customers could have their own cold storage. So they are in control of the assets however they need to be to maintain their fiduciary responsibility. So for the first time, all of the world's banks, all of their customers, all these other financial institutions that have all their customers for the first time can get involved in trading and owning, selling crypto with our approach. So that's huge. I mean, we could be the gold standard, and we could be the first time that this massive influx of new customers, has a place to go.
Man, all right. So much stuff I want to ask you about here, Tom. So hopefully I don't forget where we're going, but I want to call back on, and this is for my native crypto crowd. We've been using decentralized exchanges since 2020, right? When really, even before, if you were bold enough to use Ether Delta or IDEX or any of those, but when Uniswap came about, it felt like some new things were happening. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is, when you swap on a decentralized exchange, for technologically savvy coders, that is a gold mine for predatory behavior, right? You had mentioned miner extracted value or maximal extracted value, which are, the bots that front run you, they buy before you buy, sell into you. And what they're essentially doing is ensuring you get less. And the reason they can do that is because of the nature of the liquidity pools that are being traded on, right? And of course the networks themselves, but unfavorable trading conditions are quite common. Like if you want to go to a low liquidity pair and you want to put, 20 grand into it, you've got to break that up over time or use an aggregator with multiple dexes, and it's clunky. But people like me, we've just kind of become conditioned to think, okay, this is just the way that it's going to be moving forward. And one of the other things you touched on, we talk about counterparty risk, but I think there's the unknown risks that we take in crypto, but there are very, very large industries dedicated to ensuring that settlement happens globally millions of times a day, right? The clearinghouses and the banks that are involved with them and all sorts of stuff. And this technology, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much removes the need for that if applied correctly. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. So, our technology solves some big problems in the crypto space. So the kinds of problems that, FTX showed. But then when you look at the TradFi space, we solve big problems there too. And it was interesting kind of in early calls, you go a year back, and you're starting to describe to people the exchange and you're pitching your company and trying to find partners that are going to work with you and everything. And we got different reactions from the different crowds, right? And I spoke to the head of innovation at one of the world's big financial institutions. And he said, if your Harry Potter magic can do what you say it does, that's huge. And the reason he said that is because of the instantaneous settlement. So the fact that you remove middlemen gives you security that people aren't going to steal from you. But it also removes time. And that was the thing that they really liked. And so exchanges over time moved from T+3 to T+2. A lot of them are moving to T+1 now. A lot of them are at T+1 now. And so in the TradFi space, that means you put a trade out, you get an account with a brokerage, you put a trade out, that trade matches, with the exchange. And then it takes a day before, the asset actually is officially, transferred to you. And so there's an entire industry around that process of once the trade's made to making sure that you get the asset. And anytime you have an entire industry around it, that adds a lot of cost and a lot of delay. And if our approach removes the need for middlemen, then you remove all of that cost and that delay, which means that you have a platform that's much more efficient for users. And then, if you also can remove the shenanigans, like if you remove front running, it sucks when people come in and steal value from what you're trying to do. Like, when you're trading, you're a day trader, you're trading, trying to make money kind of short term in trades and everything. A lot of people, a lot of others just want to buy and hold for a while. And, if you have all these people that are savvy, that have figured out, the 3 cushion billiard shots, and they can come in and extract money, in these really sophisticated ways, they're taking money that comes out of the system that, comes from the users. And so if you remove that, all that value remains with users. And that, that turns into percentages that make our exchange, much more financially valuable to everybody, which again is, I think, drive a lot of usage and opportunity for us to grow and really become, the de facto place to exchange assets. And one final thing I'll add as well is, so we've got characteristics that allow new customers in. We've got characteristics that allow existing customers to trade in a better way that they're going to like. High speed, high throughput, low cost, and directly from a hard wallet. Right? There's a lot of people that are just gonna like that. But we also are trading new types of assets that haven't been able to be traded before at the time when the world is moving into this tokenization, global movement. And so all of the world's big financial institutions have a top priority now. And a lot of the world doesn't realize this yet. But all of the world's big financial institutions have this top priority of digitizing their assets, digitizing stocks and bonds, digitizing loans, digitizing, carbon credits or energy assets. Everything in the world is going to be digitized. And the world blockchain had to kind of catch up to a point where the world could move those assets over. What that's going to end up being then is lots of new types of assets. You could have NFTs that represent, that can be broken into, many pieces that represent, a construction project or something like that. And then you want to trade value across, these smaller pieces of these big projects. All of those are things that we could do on our exchange that TradFi can't do. And so again, we've got these big movements that I think are creating wins in our sales. the new administration in the crypto space, the overall tokenization movement, the movement right now and the kind of bullish sentiments in the crypto space, for the bull markets, plus, our technology coming out, and then some announcements that we've got coming up as well. Just everything is coming together. It just feels like we're riding these massive waves to the future of where exchanges are going.
Man, oh man. I hope you guys rewatch this video a couple of times. And so question for you, Tom, and this may be one of our longer ones. I hope you don't mind me keeping you for a few more minutes, but blockchain just seems like such an obvious solution to a lot of the big problems that do seem to plague traditional markets. And if, let's say somebody goes and swaps on a DEX, at least for lack of a better term, they're going to feel like they're getting instant settlement, right? You swap one token, you get another token back. Now, this isn't a secret. Everybody in DeFi and TradFi knows that this is a capability, right? But there are a lot of non-negotiables that exist in TradFi, and especially when it comes to regulated assets like securities, equities, commodities, or what have you. And if the world's biggest financial institutions are being charged with digitizing things that obviously are going to have regulation backing them, with all of the solutions on the market, and there's a lot of Turing complete networks out there that could be picked from, right? Why isn't it already happening? Like, why aren't we seeing stock markets on chain? Like, why are we still seeing, digital representations in the form of a token, but really it's just an Oracle feed that you're trading against and there's no real asset backing it? Do you understand what I'm asking?
So decentralized exchanges are built on smart contracts. So it's difficult. And then the networks that they're built on are innately a lot slower than DevvX anyways. So although you could trade on DEX and it feels like instant settlement, it's running through a smart contract system, and it's going to be, it's kind of like a digital version of the extra time and extra cost that I was talking about. It's going to be ultimately, people know how experiences on DEXs are. It's not a great experience. I think DEXs are amazing, like the concept of liquidity pools and how they work, and then how that's improved over time. It's amazing technology. It's a good It's a good example of where the crypto space is very innovative. I love what people have done with DEXs. But when you start getting into again, TradFi movements into the crypto space, you can't have that cost. You can't have that risk. You can't have where you can't control a lot of the problems like front running. Like front running is innate, in those situations, because you have validators that compete to choose what blocks come out, and that gives them the ability to order things in a way that benefit them. And so again, the system is just those platforms are just not designed the way that you want to design it to really clamp down on those kinds of shenanigans. And then again, when you start looking at TradFi moving into the crypto space, that kind of stuff becomes all the more important. And then how do you, again, market makers in the crypto space are very different than market makers in the TradFi space, and the regulations around how things are traded, and the regulations around, just the regulations in general, everything. So our platform is really well suited to, manage the high speed, high throughput, cost effectiveness that TradFi needs, but the non-custodial aspect that people like on the crypto side. So there just really isn't another technical solution out there that meshes what both sides really want in the future.
Beautiful. And when I think about this, and we can wrap it up with this, but when I think about our ability to integrate with legacy systems, the privacy on chain, the fraud, theft, and loss protection, CTS, which we just talked about, and the technology underpinning this, it almost seemed, and really not to mention the regulatory adherence. This is something I've really been super interested in. I know we've talked about this in the past, but the T1 connector is such a huge innovation from a technological standpoint when I compare it to something like a subnet or a supernet that requires a bridge and there's no way around it. And our ability to segment customers based upon location, but continue to present them with a unified experience, so we can kind of avoid the Binance US or the Binance Jersey problem that took their liquidity and fractured it. To me, that's just a huge selling point for what we're able to do moving forward. And so absolutely mind-blowing.
The sharding side of things and the sharding approach, again, on the core DevvX blockchain, gave us the ability to have high speed, high throughput, low cost, energy efficient, transactions. But over time, one of the things we found is almost the most valuable aspect of that is the architectural flexibility. And so when you talk about a regulatory context, being able to spin up a shard in any given regulatory jurisdiction, that's suited to those legal requirements is huge. You can spin up shards that, manage privacy in the EU versus, manage, considerations that Asian, countries would need, so that regulatory flexibility, that architectural flexibility toward regulatory compliance is huge. And then one other thing, is the RESTful API. You were talking about how you can onboard TradFi. There's 200,000 Solidity developers in the world, and there's 25 million web developers. And all of the world's TradFi companies have their web developers. And it's when you start thinking in terms of enterprise mentalities, it's very hard to get enterprises to do things other than how they're used to. And so if you go to them and you say you can choose your existing programmers, you can tie in with your existing system in this way. We can tie in with your IT department, your IT department's requirements. Those are also other things that other blockchains can't do. And those are the types of things that are needed, to kind of put these bigger deals in place. So just across the board, I guess the way I would summarize it is, in the very beginning, we designed our entire system for enterprise scale use. And I was literally mocked in the beginning. Like, why are you doing enterprise? Go do an ICO. And then a couple of years later, why are you doing enterprise? Just go do DeFi, right? That kind of thing. And whatever flavor of the month or the year came out in DeFi, we were focused on large scale institutional level mentalities. And it took 8 years for the world to catch up. And now that the world has caught up, our system is perfectly designed for this massive movement that's now coming into the blockchain space. At the same time, we've built this awesome technology that allows exchange in an all new way. So again, everything is just really lined up well.
Unbelievable. And, it took me 9 months to get here, but I will say that at this point, with the total package that we offer, I come from a sales background, right? If I had to sit down with somebody with a traditional crypto background and say, give me 30 minutes of your time, I am confident at the end of 30 minutes, they will have a full and complete picture of why there's nothing on the market that can do what we can do. It is beautiful. Tom, thank you so much for your time today, bud. Really always appreciate having you here. And for anyone that's watching, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because DevvExchange is coming, my friends, and we've got a lot of exciting stuff for you here in the near future. So thanks for tuning in. My name's Austin, and I'll catch you guys on the next live stream. Take care. Bye-bye.